Nightrose, there's no deck like you in Standard. What a shame. Wait, what do you mean there's a Stride deck of her now? Ah, fuck! Nightrose in Premium as a deck focuses on building strong boards for low cost and getting high power columns, keeping a high defense with strong shield cards and lots of really good card draw. And with the introduction of the Nightrose Stride deck set in Standard, we can see that it translated pretty well and actually gave us a really solid core to work with. From the deck sets themselves, we saw 5 main cards that shaped the deck to how it should be played, with cards like Levidras, which gave the deck consistent board building and CC refunding, Marauding Shade being the deck's main 15k shield that is also a potential 20k attacker to help beat down the opponent even better, Negrabone, which gave the deck some extra card draw to work off of, being able to retire itself and draw a card when it's called from drop zone, Obadiah, which is the main first stride, and from then on, future strides that allow you to flip a card from your G-zone and call another card from drop. And if it's a hollow unit, it gets 5k. So it's really good at building a board for free, really good at getting a little bit of extra power. And finally, we have the Stride Nightrose, which gave the deck a strong finisher, being a way to call cards during the battle phase, gain massive power, and have a natural crit pressure on the Vanguard circle. Outside of the deck set, we can see many lists running cards like Philander and Largo of Alvina, just a bunch of other cards that really help form the defensive nature of the deck, shape the deck's earlier stages of the game. With these core cards in mind, we can see people go into many different deck building directions with many different possible tech options shaped around their meta calls. See, these decks in JP were very strong on release because they were released right after set 4. They only had to deal with decks like Shojodoji and Paldio. Unfortunately, as English players, we do not have this luxury with our decks coming out post set 5, post the release of decks like Levidras and Rezael. For JP, with their decks pre-set 5, these Nightrose look to play super defensively, running multiple hostage order, letting them survive through the early game against decks like Impaldio, Blangmire, and then having natural, stronger card draw deal with the more multi-attack decks with decks like Doji, for example. With these decks in mind, we can see JP players running cards like the Hostage Order to let them reuse PGs, and for decks like Doji, we saw players running cards like the Watermelon Blitz Order, which gave them extra defensive power during their turns and kept the defenses strong to go into their 3rd, 4th strides, which helped them blast their opponent out of the game. With the introduction of set 5, on the other hand, and more importantly, the new Rezael and Levidras taking over the Meadows landscape, with higher power columns that triumph over Roses, that come much faster, high draw power that let them outlast Rose's current output, and easy pressure that made it harder for Nightrose to compete, considering that it was a deck that wanted to go second. So, in response, we saw that many players opted to take in more aggressive options that allowed them to play into the format. My favorite addition that can be seen with some of these lists is the addition of the Nectar of Sensationalism, allowing for a massive power boost gain and additional crit pressure that allowed the deck to keep up the pressure against their opponent. Outside of this, we saw that players like 984 Smurf on Twitter opted to run 3 specific techs that allowed them to play, that allowed them to top in their event. The addition of the Anti-Hostage Grade 2, stopping decks like Rezael or the Mirror Match from reusing their PGs from rear guards, which was one of this deck's main lose conditions at the time. On top of this, the Watermelon Order is yet again seen, which was a meta call to respond to decks like Doji with heavy multi-attack. And then my favorite tech card from his list is the addition of the Stoicheia Tayfault clone, which gave the deck another energy outlet and gave Rose the ability to pseudo-remove the cards from the opponent's board, stunning units, which can come in handy with decks like Rezael and Levidras being able to stun cards like Foxhole, Squirrel, or, in Rezael's case, Aerial Sage. Using their tech and knowledge meta calls, we have a way to build the deck for the English format, and here's how I personally built my deck. So for starters, we have the main core that came out of the Nightrose deck set themselves, which are of course Marauding Shade, Negrolazy, Negrabone, and our 2 main strides, Obadiah and Nightrose. Outside of this, we needed ways to shape up the deck's main early game with cards like Philander, which is a really strong 18k booster that helped us shape the more earlier stages of the game, and being able to consistently find our tech pieces, sending them to the drop zone, and letting them be recalled or reused later in the game. With cards like Alvina, it's a energy outlet that helps us push and aggress our opponent. With 4 more units on the board, it gets an additional 2k, but hitting for 10, which hits into those grade 2 numbers. And most importantly, it is a Corp combo piece with Negrabone in the early game, which on place, it can call Negrabone from drop zone, which activates Negrabone's effect. So when you swing with it, you can draw a card after the end of the battle boosting. Additionally, it can just grab any of your order cards, which tend to be really useful in the later stages of the game. If you find Sweet Shop, you can mill it and then add it back to hand to activate it for those reusable PGs. It can grab back Ghost Chase. If you're in a long grade 2 game, you can EB3, add Ghost Chase back to hand to replay it, bouncing Alvina, Philander, any of your pieces on board back to hand that you may need, which can come up really heavily sometimes. And then, again, my favorite card, Nectar of Sensationalism, just giving any unit on the board a massive power gain and crit pressure for little to no cost. You can just add this back and bam, one of your units gets huge, which helps pressure Levidras and Rezael a lot more. And then finally, Enlargolf. Enlargolf is just a way to add back your grade 2 or graders from drop zone to hand, so it can add back stuff like your Nightroses to set up future stride turns. It can add back Angel Ladder just to protect your board or get an extra soul and draw a card. Basically, a Soul Blast 1 filter. We have, you can grab back Energy Cyclers. If you didn't see our Arvinas, you can just grab these to try to dig further in your deck. You have Marauding Shade, one of your main targets for Largolf, which is going to be a 15k shield. You can add back Negralazy if you really need to build a board, and you can grab back any of the order cards because they're all grade 2, and the Hostage Setter himself. Outside of this, we have 2 other main tech cards that I really like running. The one of Fiarma helps you refund any of your stride costs or early ditches that you may have when you don't have cards like Alfina or Brave Shooter, and it just helps you refund stride costs. I've had multiple games where I go ditch Nightrose for stride, and then I just Energy Blast 3 to add it back to hand, so I don't have to waste a soul on Largolf. And finally, we have Nightstorm. Nightstorm is just really nice because it fills up another stride slot, like stride fodder slot, while also being card draw for the deck. And it also fulfills a key component of being a 23k attacker, which, even though we have the crest, it does come up. Outside of the main core deck build, there were some cards that were considered during the deck building process. These cards include cards like Aspronia and Saphira, allowing for an even better grade 2 game by letting you revive cards like Marauding Shade while being able to see the top card of your deck, potentially sacking your opponent with a crit out of nowhere. On top of this, we had cards like Alenia, which was also considered because it allowed you to call Negrabone and giving it 5k, making it into a 23 column, which is a great magic number into grade 1s and grade 2s. However, the soul cost for it made it a little harder to fit into the deck, unfortunately, so we decided to cut it for more consistency pieces and other cards. Maple was also a really nice way to recur board during test-in, coming back for 0 cost every single turn, which helped if you needed to spam Nightrose strides because you didn't really want to use CB for stride skill that often in order to rebuild a board. Lastly, Tommy the Ghosty is a consideration that can be made. You can cut maybe Fiarma or cut a Brave Shooter for it, but it's a really nice card being able to way to shuffle the deck for any triggers that you bot decked off Vanguard effect if you needed to be a little more aggressive with your mills, but also being a way to fetch Rose for the specific stride that you need her for. Now, looking into the future with Set 6 on the horizon, there are 2 main considerations that can be made with some new staples that came from the new set. The new soul fronts give the deck a little bit more extra soul to work off of for cards like Enlargolf, and helps you potentially bring back cards like Alenia for a more aggressive turn 2. On top of this, we have the new Regalis piece, the Fire Regalis, which is a really good card to mill off a Vanguard effect, as it can activate from drop zone and really helps you play a little more aggressively. Now, generally, how do you want to mulligan for this deck? You really want to mulligan for 3 main things. Early energy output in cards like Sea Rumble Brave Shooter, Alvina, or maybe a Fiarma for your grade 3 write-up. Aggressive pieces, again, Alvina, Philander, Negrobone, cards that allow you that you can just place down early and swing into your opponent in order to push a little bit extra damage. And stride costs or more defensive cards like Enlargolv, Marauding Shade, Ghost Chase, and the Hostage Order. You can be really greedy with the mulligan due to your Rideline grade 2 Columbard effect, being able to top 7 to find a piece to drop in hand. So you can set up your drop zone. Let's say top 7 you find Negrolazy, bam, set it up for in the drop zone later. Or you can find cards like Alvina in the top 7 to add to hand to recall on your first stride turn or on your grade 3 write-up in order to call Negrobone and continue aggressing your opponent. Now, why do I say this deck has such a strong early game? Well, it comes down to the deck's 2 strongest 4 of grade 1s, Alvina and Philander. Philander is just a card that you can place down with 0 cost whatsoever, and then you just look at top 5 and put a card that you may need later into the drop zone. After this point, it's also just a really strong 18k attacker once you get 10k in drop zone, or a 18k booster, which helps with this deck's power numbers quite a lot. On top of this, we have cards like Alvina. Alvina lets you call a grade 1 from drop zone for only EB3, so it's basically free. So we can just set it, and then bam, EB3, call Negrobone. And because Negrobone is placed from drop now, we can activate its effect at the end of the battle with boost in order to draw a card. And on top of this, Alvina also swings for 10k once you have 4 units on board, so it helps you hit for magic numbers. Alvina and Negrobone on the grade 1 turn is swinging for 18k into their 8k, for example, which is a magic number that forces 15k shield. It forces 15k shield, or when they're grade 2, it actually hits the Vanguard alone by itself. And at the end of the battle, you just retire Negrobone and it refunds itself. And you just continuously keep on doing this and draw a bunch of cards and bashing your opponent's face in, pushing them to higher damages throughout the late game. Now, once you start getting to the mid to later stages of the game, you can just start doing stuff, some crazy stuff, where because you have this large drop zone, you can just casually put some pressure on your opponent by going activate Nectar of Sensationalism on a unit, and this unit would get a ton of power based on cards in the drop zone. So in this scenario, this unit would be getting plus 15k and plus 1 critical, which helps apply a little more pressure to the opponent, as this column now swings for 28, 28, 38, 38, 53 to your opponent's Vanguard with a crit. And because you've decked in so much too, your Vanguard is naturally going to have higher trigger pressure, which helps you heal out, hit crits, and just put more and more pressure onto the opponent in the mid to late game. Overall, I just want to say I'm really fond of this deck. It's a lot of fun, really enjoyable, and I still think that even with how the current format is, it still holds a decent spot in the meta, being able to go toe-to-toe with some of the best decks in the format. But honestly, that's enough of my yapping. I'm gonna skip over to some gameplay now and just want to say I hope you enjoyed me talking about one of my favorite decks to have been released, and enjoyed the gameplay I'm about to pull up.
Please, no more Tri-Lane, please.
No, you're getting Tri-Laned.
Ah, fuck.
You're getting boned, bro.
less favor.
I swear to. I'm never
Oh,
free.
less favor.
Never free.
Ooh.
Hey, that's
I
like
got here. Yeah.
that's like half
That's
of it.
half of it. Yeah.
That's really bad. Because the goal is to get as big as possible with the Obadiah, so...
Bro, this guy's
this.
cringe, bro. I'm dying. Help.
I can reliably live, so I think the goal is to just force out the PG at the very least. Your 3
Where's the
PGs out?
nectar? PG, I think 3? 3 PGs out? Yeah, 3 PGs out.
Plus 30, plus 1 crit. And go to battle phase.
Mhm.
And Lurgle swing with boost. This is going to
I'm
be
biggest.
13 plus 30, 43, 53, 63, 63, 68, 68, plus 20 is 88 Vanguard with a crit.
Got it.
GG's.
GG's.